Donald Trump's campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, has been charged with simple battery in conjunction with the incident that he had earlier this month with ex-Breitbart reporter Michelle Fields. Now, if you don't remember this, let's show a video of the actual interaction between those two. Okay, so feel free to play that again when it's done. What you're seeing there at the bottom is Donald Trump with a red tie. There's the reporter in the yellowish sweater, and then she is pulled away by a guy who looks a little bit like Brian Unger in that video, actually, but it's not. It's actually Corey Lewandowski. And so in the immediate aftermath of that incident, which was several weeks ago, I believe it was March 11th, she reported that she had been pulled down and yanked by one of the staff. And another reporter was standing nearby, identified that man as Corey Lewandowski. Now, immediately after, Lewandowski said, "You're delusional, you're making it up. Not only did I not grab you, I've never met you." And almost immediately, the video was available. And so you've seen the video now, and there's other angles as well that make it immediately clear exactly what happened. And they continue to say that nothing happened, that he didn't pull her. But now, thanks to her filing a police report, there have been charges. We don't know exactly how that's going to go down, but we do have some of the responses from Lewandowski's legal representation and also Donald Trump, which, as you can imagine, is on the immature side of things. But what do you think about this? Is this the beginning of justice?
I think that anytime someone puts their hands on anyone else, there should be, if the person who was touched inappropriately wants to file charges or wants some sort of prosecution, it should happen. In this case, I think that the reporter honestly did exaggerate initially what occurred, because you see the video and he did put his hands on her. He did drag her. He didn't drag her to the ground. It wasn't as bad as she made it seem. But at the same time, he doesn't have the right to put his hands on her.
Yeah.
I don't think that he was lying to begin with when he said that he had never met her, because as you can see, there's a lot of chaos. There's a lot happening. So it could be possible that he just kind of, I mean,
Well, he said he didn't grab anyone.
Well, okay, so he was obviously lying about that. But in that moment of chaos, who knows? Maybe it was a knee-jerk reaction that he had, and he didn't realize the severity of what he did. Now, with that said, you don't have the right to put your hands on anyone. I don't care if you're a man or if you're a woman. You just don't.
Yeah.
And so I think the charges make sense. I know that the maximum prison time is 1 year behind
For
bars.
that particular charge, yes.
For that particular charge, he's unlikely to get that. But do I think that there should be some consequences so he understands that it's unacceptable to do that to someone? Absolutely.
Yeah, especially because, look, I agree, it is a knee-jerk reaction for this guy, and that is what he does, because just a couple of days after that event, he was photographed pulling a protester at an event. This guy believes, and look, I'm not surprised that he believes that reporters and protesters are scum. They're animals, and he can do whatever the hell he wants to them. If you're trying to talk to Trump, no, get back here. You're not going there. Go in your little press cage. Go in your little pen. And that is the message that has been delivered by Trump and by his campaign. They openly will say at their rallies that the press is the enemy, that they're traitors, that they deserve to be locked up in those little press areas that they have. And so we shouldn't be surprised that this guy thinks that he can just pull her around. And then he was defended by Trump. Trump had him next to him on the podium when he gave his victory speech at the next set of primaries. And now, as you're going to see in just a minute, he continues to defend the guy when the evidence is there. Like, you can say it's not as bad as she said it was, even though we're going to show you the bruises on her arms in just a minute. You can try to say that. You can't say that it didn't happen. We can see it fucking happening.
Exactly. It absolutely did happen. And their defense of that didn't happen at all is ridiculous, especially when you consider the evidence. Look, I commend her for being as strong as she's been throughout this entire situation. I mean, think about it. She's no longer working at Breitbart, which honestly,
she lost her Fox position as well.
Exactly. So, I mean, it hurt her career to some extent, but also at the same time, you know, you have these Trump supporters with their extremely violent rhetoric going after her, and she's not backing down. And I commend her for not backing down. I think that this guy should be brought to justice in some way. Again, I don't want any like draconian, you know,
I want to fine or something. I want him to know that he can't do this.
Exactly. I just don't want this to happen again. I don't want history to repeat itself. And the only way for them to learn their lesson and learn from what they've done is to suffer the consequences.
Yeah, they need to understand that this campaign of intimidation and in some cases violence on the part of both the campaign and the supporters needs to end, and you need to check it in any way that you can. Now, his legal representation says that he is absolutely innocent of this charge. He will enter a plea of not guilty and looks forward to his day in court. He is completely confident that he will be exonerated. Of course, that's what you're going to say. He's going to avoid that day in court, if at all possible.
Right.
And that is probably what will end up happening. But we do have the immediate Trump tweet. See, wow, Corey Lewandowski, my campaign manager and a very decent man, was just charged with assaulting a reporter. Look at tapes. Nothing there. Well, we already looked at the tapes, and everyone has already seen that there is something there. And by the way, I have no idea if he's normally a very decent guy. This is the second person that he has pulled, and there's also been multiple reports of him saying incredibly lewd things to women on the campaign trail.
Listen,
not surprising considering the company he keeps.
I don't need recommendations about decency from one of the most indecent people I've ever encountered, especially during a presidential race. So his thoughts on who is and isn't decent is completely irrelevant to me. And of course, Trump has an incentive to protect this guy, right? Because if he doesn't, I mean, it's going to make Trump look bad. It's going to make his campaign look bad. I mean, it'll make his campaign look bad, but what's incredible is regardless of what Trump does and regardless of how violent his rhetoric is, I mean, he talks about punching people in the face, and this guy's running for president, people will still support him. In fact, they'll see that type of rhetoric or they'll hear it and they'll say, well, we finally have a candidate who speaks his mind. Yeah. As if it's a good thing to have someone be violent
Trump
as they're
says
running for
he's
president.
spirited.
It's incredible. Wow.
So why don't we jump to graphic 3? You're going to see the photo that Michelle Fields tweeted out of the bruises on her arm. From the point of view of Trump and Lewandowski, she apparently did that to herself, I guess.
Wow.
He said today, Trump said, why didn't she scream when he grabbed her? Maybe she already had the bruises. Yes, your campaign just happened to grab her on the spot on her body where she already had bruises. Interesting coincidence there. Now, we've got some more tweets that I want to show you, as well as Fox News' response. But I want to jump to Donald Trump being interviewed today about the charges.
She did get bruises on her arm.
I don't know if they were bruises from that. Why? Who said they were bruises from that? How do you know those bruises weren't there before?
That's what the police...
I don't know what the police said. How do you know those bruises weren't there before? I'm not a lawyer, but she said she had a bruise on her arm. I mean, to me, if you're going to get squeezed, wouldn't you think that she would have yelled out a scream or something if she has bruises on her arm? Take a look at her.
John, let me ask you about
Take a look at her facial expression. Her facial expression doesn't even change. So, you say bruises are up. How did they get there? Who put them there? I don't know that he put them there. In any event, I'm sticking up for a person because I'm not going to let a person's life be destroyed over somebody that we have on tape, and you just take a look at what people are saying when they see that incident on tape. And no jury, in my opinion, no jury would convict a man and destroy a man's life over what you would.
Well, she already lost 2 jobs, so someone's life has been dramatically altered, if not destroyed.
Right.
But he's sticking up for the man. So he has no information. His defense is always, I don't know how anything got there. I don't know who it is. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know nothing.
He's incredibly uninformed for someone who's running for president, when you really think about it, right? I don't know what the police said. Well,
they're telling him the police said that the bruises were there.
I mean, this.
But I don't know.
I don't know. Okay, well, you've just been informed, so what do you have to say about that? But this is the way he dodges things. He makes vague statements when it comes to scandals, when it comes to his political ideology, when it comes to his so-called policy ideas. That's how Trump has been able to get as far as he has. First of all, reporters won't ask him follow-up questions when he gives them vague answers, or when he tries to dodge answers by saying things like, "Oh, I don't know, I haven't heard that." Well, that's not good enough. Okay, I'm informing you of what the reality is right now. Now you need to comment on it. Yeah. That's what a real reporter does.
The problem is that he is, like all politicians are slippery and evasive, but he's willing to lie openly in a way that I think most politicians, like you can't, how do you respond? Like you would literally, you are forced to act in a way that could literally destroy your career if you say, no, you little lying coward, stop lying. That's what you have to say. Because you can't be, well, I think that you're disseminating about that topic. You can't be like the old school journalist with this little schoolyard bully, this little sniveling coward, as Ted Cruz would say. But he forces you to it. And so he's standing by him. And that whole interaction, you just watched it. His body language and the things he's saying. Can you imagine Bill Clinton or George W. Bush or Obama? Like, I don't know. She got bruises. I don't know where the bruises came from. Can you imagine anyone leading anything, let alone a country, acting the way he just acted?
The media's perception and treatment of Trump went from not taking him seriously, thinking he's a joke and being entertained by him, to all of a sudden taking him so seriously and wanting access to him so badly that you refuse to hold him accountable for his actions, hold his campaign accountable for their actions. And it's amazing how easily he can get away with non-answers, playing stupid, right? While simultaneously acting as though he knows better than any other candidate out there.
Yeah.
No one challenges him. And that's not an accident. Again, it has to do with access. It has to do with these reporters not wanting to push too much because they know that if they do, Trump will probably ban them. It happened to Megyn Kelly with her insanely easy questions that he deemed attacks, right?
You know
need to
what I
be
would do?
fearless as a journalist, okay? Here's what doesn't really matter that much to people who genuinely care about the news. Your access to big names, okay? They care about your credibility. They care about whether or not you're holding people in power accountable for their actions. That means more for your ratings than having a big name like Donald Trump on your show. I know people have a hard time believing that because they're old school journalists that think that celebrities and big name politicians are the key to rating boosts. It doesn't work that way anymore. This is the new age of new media. Sorry.
Trump's a complicated guy in that he both plays stupid while also being stupid.
I know.
Usually it's a smart person pretending not to know things. Well, here in this case with him, I would say what MSNBC, if it cared at all about getting liberal viewers, which it doesn't anymore, it's made clear about that. That's why we need the Young Turks. They should say we're giving an immediate $100,000 bonus to any reporter who's banned from the campaign bus of Donald Trump. That's how tough we are with these candidates. Come to us for the tough questions.
Yeah,
and we will give you that bonus if you are tough enough on him that he's like, no, I don't like your tone anymore.
Look, whenever there's a big scandal and reporters try to get a comment from someone involved in that scandal, if that person refuses to talk to the reporters, they'll always mention it in their article. So-and-so refused to comment, right? And part of the reason why they do that is A, to show that the reporters at least attempted to get a statement from that person, and B, to give the readers or the viewers the information they need to know about how this person refuses to talk to the media. And if they refuse to talk to the media, it's almost like an admission of guilt there, right? And so, again, like I talked about the Hillary Clinton interview. I came super close to interviewing Hillary Clinton, and my manager told me, look, we're close. I'm not going to tell you what you can and can't publish in your Raw Story articles about Hillary, but just like try to take it easy if you can. Next day, I did what I needed to do, and I wrote a negative article about Hillary. I don't remember exactly what it was.
You called her the C word. It was rough.
I did not call her the C word.
I'm joking.
Right? But it was a fair article in that it focused on a policy or something that she legitimately did wrong.
Yeah.
And to me, publishing that information and making sure that readers have that information available to them so they can be informed members of a democratic process is way more important to me than sitting down and having a one-on-one interview with Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay? I'm not going to play patty cakes with a politician.
You're smarter than Trump. He loves to say that the leadership of America is bad. It's just filled with bad people who just can't get things done. Like, look at who he's surrounding himself with. Incompetent idiots who can't avoid lawsuits. This is so simple for Donald Trump. All he has to say is, my campaign manager is 100% not guilty, but obviously we respect the legal process of America and we respect the rights of Michelle Fields, and so he's going to be stepping down until the legal process has gone through, and then he will be returning to help me win the presidency. That's what a president says. That's what a leader says. They don't simply say, bruises, I don't know where the bruises came from. And then the leader, by the way, does not then go on Twitter, which is apparently the most important battleground state for Donald Trump, because that's where he spends all of his time. If I could jump to graphic 18, you're going to see here a tweet that he sent out. Victory press conference was over. This is a graphic from something. Why is she allowed to grab me and shout questions? Can I press charges? He tweeted that today after the charges came out. And then in the next graphic, why is this reporter touching me as I leave news conference? What is in her hand?
Oh my God.
So, like, don't miss out on what's happening here. This is a guy who wants to be president, not someday in the future. He's running for it now, mocking a woman for filing charges of assault against a man.
That's right. But, you know,
Mocking her to millions of followers.
but don't forget, Trump is the kindest to women.
He hates women. He will tolerate Eastern European women as imports, as trophy wives. And that is the only interest he has in them. Potentially his daughters as well. He might upgrade them to wife status at some point.
Oh my God.
Other than that, he's got no interest in women. He doesn't respect you. He doesn't really care about your vote. He'll take it, but he's not going to do anything to actually earn it. And he will openly disrespect you and mock you on social media if he has any excuse to.
But let's be clear, his hatred extends to those in lower socioeconomic statuses.
That's true.
It extends
A lot
to
of groups.
anyone who he doesn't identify with or doesn't find similar to himself. So
Yeah.
it has to do with his own egotistical nature and thinking that he's above everyone.